kneel at the shrine, deceived by the wine. How was the earth conceived? Infinite space. Is there such a place? You must believe in the human race. Can you believe God makes you breathe?
Welcome to another evening in Elul. I'd like to explain the piece of music that you've just heard. It comes from an album by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and it was the kind of music I was listening to in the early 1970s, and it had an interesting effect, this particular piece of music, on my religious understanding. Emerson, Lake and Palmer here attack organized religion, and the line that I cut off halfway through, "Can you believe God makes you breathe?" actually continued with the line, "Why did he lose 6 million Jews?" I didn't want to have that played to music. I didn't think that would be very appropriate. But it did raise an enormous number of questions in my teenage head. And I'm going to be addressing some of those questions in this evening's broadcast as well. A few days ago, I used as the basis for one of these reflections on Elul a fairly long, silent reading that appears in the Mahzor, in the prayer book that we read on Yom Kippur morning. It was offered, to use the words in the book, as a silent confession. And it had lots of fairly meaningful and helpful things, encouraging us to look at ourselves, to accept responsibility for things that we have done wrong, things that we have failed to do that we could have done that would have made things better, both in our personal lives and our relationships, but also in our world, how we bear responsibility for the bad things that happen in our world, the pollution, the conflict that goes on in our world. We could all, I think, do more to just make our world a better place, but we tend not to do so. And that was the thrust of the majority of that reading. And I found that bit very powerful. But as I got to the end of it, even as I was reading it and recording it, I was beginning to think, I don't like this bit very much, the last couple of paragraphs of it. And I actually had a conversation with it in an adult education class at the end of last week. And the more I looked at it, the more uncomfortable I felt with the whole thing. And it's actually, I'm going to revisit it tonight. It's just one paragraph, so there's nothing serious here, but I think it is serious because we need to look at stuff like this and say, really? Because for me, it's the kind of things that religion tries to inflict on us and enforce us to do and to believe that actually makes us want to give up the whole project. Anyway, I'll be interested to know what you think, but as I say, the last couple of paragraphs of this reading I found very difficult. So I'm going to start with the very final paragraph of this prayer, which I think is okay. I think it's a bit self-effacing and self-blaming, but it's kind of picks up the theme of Yom Kippur, where we're supposed to recognize our failings. Help me then, O God, help me always, but especially now on this sacred day of atonement. Help me to banish from myself whatever is mean, ugly, callous, cruel, stubborn, or otherwise unworthy of a being created in your image. Purify me, revive me, uplift me. Fill me with noble resolves this day and help me to hold on to them throughout all the days that lie ahead. Forgive my past. Lead me into the future, resolved to be your servant. As I say, it's still a bit harsh, but that is, I suppose, the nature of Yom Kippur. We are to recognize everything that is bad in us and encourage ourselves to do something about it, to resolve to get rid of it or at least manage it better and be better people in the years ahead. But it's okay. I mean, purify me, revive me. Do we want God to purify us? What does that even mean? But I want to leave it just there. Just leave that last paragraph floating there, thinking of all the things that we need to work on, that we need to banish from ourselves. That is certainly one of the emphases of the day of Yom Kippur. But I'm going to go now to the preceding paragraph, the one that comes before it, that when I read it through with this adult education group, I thought, honestly, do we really say that? And do we really believe it? So here we go. How to cultivate the divine image in me. There is the question and the answer. Surely it means to cultivate your presence, to seek you more earnestly, to submit myself to your will, to say to you, here I am, mold me, guide me, command me, use me, let me be your co-worker, an instrument of your redemptive purpose. Now, the more I look at that paragraph and the more I contemplate some of the imagery in it and what it's trying to say, it's actually really frightening. Do we really want to say to God, however we conceive God, mold me, guide, command, use me? You know, I'm going to place myself completely at your disposal. You can manipulate me. You can let me be. I just find it extraordinary that we're actually saying stuff like that as a prayer. It feels so submissive and so dismissive of our own potential, our own ability, our own choices as human beings. And it's a very difficult concept. It suggests to me this idea of God as a kind of a puppet master, manipulating, I'm going to allow myself to be managed by you, God, into the sort of person you want me to be, to do the sort of things that you want me to do. Submit myself to your will. I mean, really? And that's a really complicated and a very frightening aspect of an attitude towards God. And it doesn't seem to me to have any place in a liberal prayer book at all. And it's the kind of thing, I was thinking about it after we had the adult education class, that's exactly the kind of language that sent me scurrying away from synagogues in my early teenage years, because none of this stuff made any sense. Why on earth would I want to say things like this? You know, guide me and use me. It's not, I don't envisage God in that way. And I certainly don't want to see myself as being somehow used by God or I have to submit myself to God to allow that to happen. It's such a negative concept, a negative idea of how God operates. So I suppose I'm having said when we read the whole prayer, and much of the rest of it is really, I wouldn't call it uplifting, but it helps us to acknowledge our failings, which of course is the purpose of Yom Kippur. But the answer to those failings surely isn't to submit oneself to God's will and ask to be commanded and guided and used by God. It seems to me to be a very destructive way of looking at anything. However, okay, there is a but in here, because it depends how you conceive or understand God. If you believe that God is somehow some kind of external force exerting power over the world and over us as individuals, watching us and pushing us in a certain direction or wishing we would go in a certain direction and being angry with us if we don't go in that direction, I think that's a really negative attitude to God. And that's the kind of God that I ran away from at the age of 13 when I met him, and he was a him, in my Orthodox synagogue. And it's taken me a long time to get back to any kind of understanding of where I think God may dwell. And I honestly don't know if I'm right or not. But if I am right, the kind of God that I relate to, and the kind of God that I believe in, if that's the right verb, the kind of God that I work for, if for want of a better way of putting it, is a different kind of God altogether. It's a God that dwells inside of us, each individual. It's whatever it is that motivates us, that governs our behavior, that sits in our consciences, if you like, and asks us to to contemplate whether we are doing the right thing at any point in our lives. And that's the key piece. Are we doing the right thing? And where does that question come from? It doesn't come from somewhere above the clouds, up in the heavens, or inside the ark, or even from the voice of a rabbi wagging his finger at you and telling you to be better. It comes from inside of us. Each of us individually knows whether or not we've failed, whether or not we've done the right thing or the wrong thing. So if we consider that God, that divinely inspired spark that guides us and encourages us to make the right decisions in our lives, then that changes the whole dynamic of even this reading. So, how to cultivate the divine image in me? Okay, somewhere in me is something that is telling me how I ought to behave. How to cultivate that? That's the question. We should cultivate that presence, which is a recognition that somewhere inside each of us is an urge and a drive to try to do the right thing, or at least to know what the right thing is to do. So, to seek you more earnestly. So I need to look further into myself. I'm not searching for God in some wilderness or up above the clouds or in a sunset, but inside of me, whatever the force is inside me that makes me choose the right things. And when I've found that, then it makes perfect sense to say to this part of myself, mold me and guide me, be part of who I am, become much more of the way that I behave. And it's something that we're addressing inwardly, not outwardly. And I think for me, that's really what the essence of prayer is about. It's about talking to ourselves. And it's the essence of what God is about. Because it's about recognizing in ourselves the potential that we have and the urge that we have to do the right thing, and how often we fail because we don't listen to that part of our conscience, that divine element inside us, telling us what to do. So that was a different kind of reflection on the evening of Elul. I mean, I don't know whether it worked for you or not, but it was a bit of a rant almost about my failure to understand God when confronted with language like that seems so domineering and so insulting to me as an individual, to believe that I might want to submit myself to some abstract divine figure. But I think to recognize that that's not what it's talking about. That if we see God as being something inside of us rather than something out there manipulating and controlling us, then we actually have a much better chance of understanding what prayer is about, what religion is about, what Yom Kippur is about, and what life is about. It's about being the best people that we can, recognizing in us those latent urges, the spark that's implanted within us that encourages us to be the best people that we can, and trying harder to listen to those voices within us, and then acting out in our lives the lessons that we learn, the lessons that we hear from whatever it is that dwells inside us. So I hope that's been helpful. And if you disagree, then fantastic. I would love to have a conversation with you about it. But I think that if we locate God inside us rather than somewhere externally, maybe we have a better chance of finding out what this whole religion thing and this whole life thing is all about. Adonai yishmor et seitenu uvo'enu me'ata v'ad. Pray that God will guard our going out and our coming in now and always. Amen. Laila Tov, and stay safe.
Don't